My name is R Crosby Lyles, and this is news from the can. And this is the breaking story. Historic winter storm hits Pensacola Beach. This is Storm Chaser Aaron Rigsby's channel. Looks pretty good. I've got it kind of on this right here, this tire track here. I believe this is in Pensacola, and that looks like about 6 inches of snow. That's the most snow I've ever seen in Florida. Snow in Florida is not necessarily outside of natural variability, but that's a lot of damn snow. It's really hard to make predictions. New Orleans gets more snow than Anchorage. That's fascinating. So let's talk about this. I'm going to hit a couple of bullet points here. I wrote them down. Little things to file away for the beginning. They were wondering why there was a spike in global warming recently, and they thought that it was out of line for how much CO2 is in it. It seemed to be, for some reason, out of line for the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere and so forth. What they've probably forgotten about is the Hunga Tonga eruption raised the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere by 13%, and they had basically said that diffraction effects from that might cause disruptions or problems with crops. Might create some crop failures because of sunlight, problems with sunlight, or diminution of the ozone layer. But principally, the big thing is that it would cause a spike in global temperatures by 1.5 degrees, which is the deadly amount that they didn't want to do. So, there's a lot of narrative stuff being blown here. So there's that thing, which wasn't really first, but I did have it at the top of the thing here. All life on Earth produces volatile organic compounds. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, are a group of chemicals that readily evaporate into the air, often found in products like paints, cleaning supplies, and fuels. But often they're created by fires, forest fires, and other industrial processes. What makes them volatile is that they bubble off into a gas at low temperatures and pressures. It's lower temperatures than what water does. 2, large fires cause global cooling. That's because of the nuclear winter type of thing. And we're talking about large fires, like when you're looking at the type of fires that they have in India that are agricultural fires, they're lower level, and so you end up with a lot of smoke in the lower atmosphere. You end up with temperature inversions and things like that. What we're talking about is California fires have a very specific kind of look to them. So this is Secure Team 10, and I'm jumping around a little bit here. And this is what's been going on lately. And this feeds into a theory of ice ages. And it's not really ice ages, it's reglaciation, but they call it ice age. We can call it ice age for now. I'm going to give them a little like here. This is Secure Team 10, and we neither condone nor refute the statements made by Secure Team 10. The video displays interesting footage from space of the California wildfires of January 2025 that we point to as examples of current phenomenon. Okay? Let me play this.
Raising eyebrows for sure.
I do watch Secure Team 10. I enjoy listening to the guy. He has a voice. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at wildfires in California. So you're starting with higher elevations, mountainsides and things like that. But these fires burn very hot. And they have footage. I don't have it handy right now, but they showed some footage during these fires recently. And this has happened more than once. I've seen more than one fire-nado in California. It's like an area that is prone to producing fire-nados. And I bring that up because these are the kind of fires we're talking about. We're talking about big, bad fires. Lahaina might have been hot enough to do this. Fires that inject large amounts of smoke into the upper atmosphere, stratosphere, that produce enough convection and enough rise to inject that smoke into the upper atmosphere. And you watch the ferocity. This is from space, and it's but you can see the whirling, how that looks. what you're seeing is you're seeing large amounts of smoke being thrown up into the upper atmosphere. This is a classic example of that. And so they're showing that fire is erupting in these places simultaneously. I've seen more than one video about this, and so this is a conspiracy theory that somebody went out and set these fires at the same time. That's a really tall order. And so in order to be able for that to happen, whoever went out and did that without getting caught, I mean, okay, so there's a very good reason why this happens. Because you have conditions that occur at the same time over a wide area. Conditions that are ripe for spontaneous combustion with the right temperatures and the right kind of material. And so when material is very dry, or you certainly have mixture, you can have spontaneous combustion. And that could happen between, in different areas at the same time, just because the conditions, the air temperature, pressure, humidity all reach the same point in those areas at the same time. But there's that, and there's the other thing that, how they say lightning never strikes in the same place at the same time. Lightning can strike in multiple places at the same time. If you have like a lightning tracker or a lightning radar on your phone, and you can see that lightning will actually strike in 2, 3, 4, 5 places at the same time. And that may be actually what's happening here. Miles apart, fires breaking out is totally possible. It's entirely possible. It's scientific. So it doesn't really require, in other words, it's not impossible by any stretch. And it happens all the time. So, but this is great footage. I'm not sure what its source is. And I mean, what a horrific god-awful thing that is. The link for this is in the description, so I have to say I neither condone nor deny what he's saying about this. I have basically just sort of debunked the theory that this is people going out, that it's a conspiracy, that people went out and set these fires at the same time. I mean, it's possible, but you got to come stepping with some evidence, with some human resource evidence for that. So there's that. Large fires cause global cooling. Nuclear winter. Firestorms with a lot of convection, they can create their own. Several California wildfires over the past decade have produced their own weather systems, and California, by the way, is the poster child for wildfires. They have movies that have been made. As a matter of fact, the Los Angeles County Fire Department produced a Hollywood movie to document a fire that they had back in 1962 or 3, somewhere in there, because it wasn't as devastating as this fire, but it was devastating. And it showed how they basically, even though they showed up with all the equipment and they, and they were ready to rock, the wind conditions and the temperature and the low humidity made the fire almost impossible to fight. And they just had to basically retreat in a lot of cases. And they had to use tactics, obviously, which is very similar to this fire here. And so there are some issues Bill Maher brought up. I don't have a link to it.
Link is in the description. Let's move on, shall we? The whole thing with global warming is that scientists feared that the Earth would revert back to a hothouse regime instead of an icehouse regime.
Okay, so Dan Britt, he's an instructor at UCF, I believe. I don't know if he's still there or not, but he has been. So Dan Britt is a climate scientist one of the original people that went out and collected the mud cores so that they could analyze temperature patterns over the geologic time. And what they discovered is that, so what he will tell you is that all of the fires and the rain and the floods and all of that stuff that's in the noise. The through line is sea level rise, or fall, for that matter. So they were commissioned by ExxonMobil to do research on climate change because of that fact, because of the through line being sea level rise, oil is formed in the sediments of shallow seas. So if you know what the level of the sea was at various geological time spaces, then you know where to look for oil. That's how one of the ways that they're able to find where the oil is, which is in this video here. The entire climate change narrative in a nutshell. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So this is what he says close to the beginning of the video, his video, which I'm not sure you can find anymore. Right up in the front, he says that the Earth is in an ice age, has been in an ice age for the past 2.5 some odd million years, between 2.5 3 million years. And before that, it was a hothouse regime. And what caused the Earth to lose all that pesky CO2 and cool down was the Tibetan Plateau. So the Tibetan Plateau used to be in the floor of a shallow sea, I think. And then now it's a plateau it's a giant area of land that is over 18,000 feet tall. And so what really sucks carbon dioxide out of the air, according to Dan Britt, is rock weathering. So how does rock get weathered? Well, it gets weathered from carbon dioxide being absorbed into water, coming out as acid rain and water droplets. And that's where your deposits of quartz come from. Quartz is one of the most common minerals in the world, and that's where it comes from. And so there's just gobs and gobs of quartz crystal everywhere, of which Australia has a shit ton of, and they also have a shit ton of high-grade metallurgical coal in Australia. And this is how solar panels are made. So over the past, since 2019, carbon dioxide has gone off the chain. And if you look down my channel, basically, this is something that I've documented because I just so happened that I was looking at it. And I was looking at Copernicus atmosphere monitoring. Looked over there and started monitoring it. Well, there's somebody named Margot's Healing Corner, and she'd been looking at methane for many years now, using that same service, Copernicus atmosphere monitoring service. And methane's been doing weird stuff for a long time. There's been large evolutions of methane coming from the Arctic Ocean, principally around the Aleutian Islands, I think, it looks like. But this is something that's been going on for a long time. And my theory, of course, or my hypothesis is the methane off-switch hypothesis, where actually global warming there's a spike in global, and he will tell you, there's a spike in global temperatures ahead of every period of reglaciation. So we're in an interglacial period. Matter of fact, there's more on that in a moment. So the fear is that from scientists, or what they will tell you, is that from the amount of industrial carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere, that the Earth will revert back to a hothouse regime, and then sea level will rise back to those hothouse levels. And I don't think that can happen because the Tibetan Plateau hasn't gone anywhere. And not only that, but you've got the Tibetan Plateau, you've got the Andes Mountains, you've got the mountains in, you've got the Rocky Mountains and the mountains in really all over the world. And those mountains transport that carbon dioxide. There's a regime there that causes carbon dioxide to come out in the snow and the rain, because carbon dioxide is very soluble in water. So you have this mitigation all over the world that takes carbon dioxide out. It's not just plants. And the other thing is, so what caused the hothouse regime, frankly, is plant life, plant and animal life. There was a lot more plant and animal life at that time, and you didn't have the Tibetan Plateau and what have you, but you had a lot more plant life, and plants and animals produce volatile organic compounds, and they're heavy volatile organic compounds, more than one carbon chain involved. And volatile organic compounds are very heat trapping. So there's probably two angles that happen when there is reglaciation. Climate toast. Climate toast. This guy here. It's all these links are in the description. This is Jim White, Dr. Jim White. So I did this funny thing with him speaking, but it's Obama climate toast. Kind of ill-conceived, but what the hell. I got to keep it because it's got Jim White, and I can't find the Jim White video anymore. So Dr. Jim White is basically saying that sudden changes in the atmosphere, changes in climate must come from changes in the atmosphere. And so that's got to be from firestorms or methane. Methane is very light, goes right to the stratosphere, deposits carbon dioxide and water vapor in the stratosphere, which can produce albedo, and greenhouse gas in the stratosphere causes global cooling. It's a function of statistical mechanics. So this is Ice Age. This is the video that I did May 8th, 2017, and it's basically talking about this video, which is a documentary about the upcoming Ice Age. Back in 1988, they thought that there was that a ice age or reglaciation was imminent, and then all of a sudden it got turned on its head. In fact, our Bell and Whitley Strieber wrote their book, and Coming Global Superstorm came out, and then right after that, very close on, Al Gore comes out with An Inconvenient Truth. Boiling death is a lot scarier than snow. So, is he full of shit? I don't know. I think it's a genuine concern that scientists have had, and you don't really hear a lot of debate, though. You don't really hear a lot of debate about it. It's a fact. Carbon dioxide does produce global warming, and but I think there's more to it going on than what they really, there's no room there for discussion. It's like, it's global warming, fuck you. Any other ideas, get out of here. So why is it that, what's the deal with, how is it that what happens to that carbon dioxide? Why is it that a sudden change, a sudden shift to cold, what that does is it gets rid of the carbon dioxide. All that carbon dioxide comes out in the snow because carbon dioxide is very soluble in water. And when you have lower temperatures, the carbon dioxide is absorbed and it sublimates along with, there's a confluence of how the carbon dioxide is absorbed into the water and then comes out in the snow, comes out in the rain. And when the weather turns cold, the carbon dioxide that's what happens. It basically falls right out of the atmosphere. And if it's widespread enough that it can basically reverse all of the carbon dioxide that's been injected. And if it's the geologic record, the reason that the coming global superstorm and all that was interesting is because it discussed the idea of rapid onset ice age, meaning that it takes place in hours or days and not like months, years, decades. And when it does, you're talking about many tens of feet of snow falling all at once. You're talking about a lot of people getting killed. It's a massive catastrophe, destabilizing, and messes up industries and farming and economies. So, but the question that I've had personally is about the trigger. And what this says, this guy has been around since the 70s. I don't know if he's still alive or not. I don't think so. The Hamaker theory is what it's called. It's from the 1970s, and it's by John Hamaker. And what he says is that they do a kind of a little offshoot here in this thing. They talk about, you can see him talking about global warming and stuff. And they talk about acid rain and how to get your crops bigger. They grind up stone and put it on crops, and it causes the fruit of your crops, your crops, to grow bigger. So you can see the picture here. Basically, his theory is that old growth forests leach out all of the nutrients from the soil, and then you have die-off of large trees and large fires. So the interesting bit about this is that fires play a large part in the concept of reemergence of an ice age or reglaciation. So issues with that are, what's the trigger? Is it the firestorms? Or is it methane in the stratosphere? I have videos about how, and apparently it's been backed up recently, articles have been written about change in magnetic field, what's called an excursion magnetic field that happened about 41,000 years ago that apparently caused some ice fields to regrow rapidly. And why that happens is because magnetic fields affect currents, can affect ocean currents, because ocean currents are salt water, and because salt water basically kind of conducts an electric current, that it can be that those currents can be affected by the presence of or lack of a magnetic field. So when things happen with the Earth's magnetic field, because it propagates straight up out of the, it depending on where you are on the Earth, if you're anywhere near where the North Pole is or the South Pole is, then those lines of magnetic force go straight up. And so what happens when it goes straight up, you use the right-hand rule, the current will curl on the magnetic field. So the magnetic fields are very weak, but when you look at planetary scales, there's a term called the L term that comes in when you're talking about large scales, is why it's L, that comes in that where you can actually see deflection on larger scales. So it's possible that when the magnetic field actually flips, that current would go in the opposite direction, would turn in the opposite direction, and those would be northernmost currents, because that's where the magnetic field is going straight up and down. Further down the globe, towards the equator, etc., the angle of incident of the magnetic field is different. So this would cause the currents to do, you would have more tangential changes in the current, or upwelling. It would change upwelling and downwelling, whatever the terminology used for that. So that's a thing. And the reason that the question is because there's a regularity here. So the glacial periods last about 100,000 years, and the interglacial periods last about 10,000 years, and there's this regularity. And when you look at the thing here, it says, here you go, you are here. So what this shows is there's a glacial period here, and there's an interglacial period that's very small, and we are at the end of a glacial period. An interglacial period, excuse me. And when you look at the geologic record, when you look at the material that Dr. Britt collected for ExxonMobil, I think it was, back in the 80s, I want to say maybe back in the 80s, might have been back in the late 70s, 80s, something like that. When they originally did these studies, and that's, you've heard about this, that they knew about it, and they didn't say anything, and they kept their mouths shut and all this. What you can see in the geologic record is that before every glacial period, there is a spike in global warming, and it goes up very hot and turns around, and so there's a spike. And whenever you see a spike like that, it means that there was a sudden turnaround. There was a sudden change that happened that caused global temperatures to go from runaway global warming to runaway ice. And, it's there. The animals being buried in snow with green vegetation still in their mouths and things like that. So sudden rapid onset ice age is the coming global superstorm thing. And this is a theory that a guy had, and this was a documentary that came out on BBC back in the 80s, and they shelled it. They took it off the air. So, now what's my theory about the whole thing with global warming? If it's, because if we just put a whole shit ton of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to build a whole shit ton of wind turbines and solar panels. I mean, there's just really no other way to say it. And also, artificial intelligence is going to put more CO2 in the atmosphere than the oil industry ever thought of putting in there. Pardon my French, but the biggest dick in the room used to be ExxonMobil, used to be the oil companies. Not anymore. Now the biggest dick in the room is Google. Google and Apple, Facebook, SpaceX and Tesla. I don't know so much about that, but Google for sure. Google is Alphabet. The people that own Google, Alphabet has 2 units, and they're worth well over, I think, probably $3 or $4 trillion. They've got more money, I think, than Aramco. And Aramco used to be, $2 trillion operation. So, that's a lot of pull. That's a lot of political power. And obviously we can see from things going on now, Saudi Arabia, Aramco, and Israel have an enormous amount of pull, and it's all because of that money. Israel is also has a tech sector that's second only to Silicon Valley. But why do this? What's the deal? Is there some reason why they would push the global warming agenda, if it wasn't a real thing? It is real. That is a real thing. Industrial carbon dioxide does raise global temperatures. That's a fact. But, will it cause the Earth to turn into a hothouse, back into the hothouse regime? I doubt it. I don't think so. The things that cause that, you have to put a lot of sulfur compounds into the ocean. You have to lower the acidity. You have to make the oceans a lot more acidic and things like that. So why would they do this? Where's this coming from? One of the things is possibly, what's the big deal? What's the push? Is the Club of Rome limits of growth, where this is Wikipedia, but I've got this nice little graph here, and I wonder if I'm going to be I got to get my thumbnail out of the way. Model standard run is shown in the limits of growth. So this is the world model, the World 3 model, based on 5 variables: population, food production, industrialization, pollution, consumption of non-renewable natural resources. So I wonder if I can pull this up. Yes, I can. Okay, so here we go. 1900 is over on the left, 2100. 2100 is on the right. So that means the year 2000 is right in the middle. And right in the middle is where all this stuff is going on, where resource depletion has already started before 2000. Now, this is according to, I think they reran it and then they I don't know if this is the rerun or the original, but according to some folks, the rerun that they did on this actually moved the timetable forward towards where we are now. In other words, you are here. This is 2025, right dead in the middle is 2000. So we're like right here in this mix of collapse. Looks like pollution kind of heals over in the not too distant future, 2030s. And population starts to heal over in maybe the late 2040s, something like that. 2050s, yeah, maybe, right? But all this collapse stuff should be going on right now. So my theory on that is that all the global warming stuff, well, there's two parts to that. All the global warming stuff, this limits of growth and collapse because of the depletion of resources, and you also have a demographic collapse in some areas. There's all these things going on that actuaries have said that we were going to have a massive depopulation in the United States recently, in recent years. So this thing here, what do you do about that? Well, I mean, what is you have an industrial movement to produce a bunch of stuff that we may not really even need, and it may not even really work that well. Because if you've ever seen a 10 megawatt wind turbine like in Costa Rica or something, we flew into Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica, and those giant things are standing there, and the blades aren't moving. Because in order to get a 10 megawatt generator to move, you have to produce a certain amount of resistance. In order to get that thing to move, you got to have megawatts of wind. So I'd have to do the math to figure out what the area, the cross-sectional area of the wind turbine is, what the density of air is, and so because that's how you figure out how much power, how fast the wind's got to be blowing in order to turn that turbine. So, and solar panels, we just totally blew the roof off of the amount of the CO2 in the atmosphere. Just went off the chain, off the scale since 2019. And it's got to be from making solar panels and wind farms, because making the stuff, making the gearbox for a 10 megawatt wind turbine. They're not necessarily that big, but they're not that small either, and as many of them as we're putting up. And then you're talking about smelting the copper, the conductors that you have to wire all that stuff up with, which is they run for miles. It's there's a copper shortage. I wonder why, because they're wiring all that stuff up. And it's a lot of material. It's a lot of material coming out of the ground. It's a head scratcher. It's like, what's really going on? They're expecting a demographic collapse maybe, and then so all that stuff is it's a phony, industrial push to put enough profit in the pockets of these industrial companies that they can ride through a short-term 20, 30-year demographic collapse or something. Something like that. And which brings me to Shauna Swan and her book Countdown. I heard most of a podcast where she was talking how modern world threatening sperm counts, altering male and female reproductive development, and imperiling the future of the human race. So there's this buildup of phthalates in our bloodstreams, and probably in the food chain, and in human beings, that is causing these issues. And then COVID, forget about it. I mean, COVID can just totally shit hammer. I know people, more than one person, that their testosterone went to zero, and it's linked to COVID. You know, this is something that COVID does. So, the shit is hitting the fan in more way than one. You know, and you're like, well, what's really going on? It looks like they're preparing for an event. That's what it looks like. That they're preparing for an event, a major event, and so they want to be ready to crack down. You know, when population goes down, power shifts to the left, to labor, and because of that alone, the big wigs in society start pushing for fascism, because fascism is a bulwark against socialism. They want to keep their position. Says somebody else in here, Stacy Colino. Shanna H. Swan, PhD. So it was fascinating to listen to her talk about how they did the statistics. You know, that they were rigorous, very, very rigorously looked at the sperm counts and how they did this, how they collected the data, and where this assault on sperm counts and development is coming from. So this is a potential reason why they would, you know, I mean, because it doesn't really make any sense. If there's a problem with, you know, with global warming specifically, does it really make any sense to put probably 10 times more CO2 than you would have? I mean, that we would have been better off just to burn the fucking coal for energy than to make all these goddamn solar panels and wind farms, and the amount of energy that it takes for artificial intelligence. I mean, it's absurd. It just they've broken their own narrative. They've broken their own fucking narrative. It strains believability beyond possible measure. So we got snow in Florida, and this is one of those things that this is a potential thing that can happen. I mean, this is the coming global superstorm. This is the sudden onset ice age, means that you got gobs of snow falling. And this is a nice, pleasant amount of snow here. The kind of amount of snow that I've been talking about on my channel for all these years is tens of feet. You know, and just to reiterate, a year ago or so, last year before that, over 50 people died in Buffalo because they went out for a pack of smokes or a rock or whatever the hell they were looking for. And the mayor came on and said, look, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, don't go out. Do not go out in this storm. And a bunch of people went out and froze to death in their cars. You know, we're talking about enough snow to crush an ordinary wood frame house. 10, 20 feet of snow on top of your house, if your house is not built for that. It's like getting hit by an avalanche. So it's good to be prepared. Don't be scared. Be prepared. The big thing is, you know, communication equipment. Shortwave radio. Citizens band radios. They sell them. I don't sell any of that stuff because of the seriousness of the topic. I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm not capitalizing on it because I want people to hear what I'm talking about. But here we are, and here's this. You know, and remember that climate is very spiky. It'll go hot and cold and hot and cold. It's a sawtooth thing from year to year. You know, you can have 7 years of really hot weather and 7 years of really cold weather, 7 years of drought, 7 years of flood. Fascinating. That whole 7 years like biblical. So anyway, that's the deal. And, you know, I don't know what they got going on. You know, there's some funky, obviously. I don't want to really belabor that because I'm not really sure there's a lot to be said about, you know, our political situation. And unless I have something really specific to say about it, I think everybody out there is, you know, the conversation is going on. And I need to sort of like, this is my ballywick here. This is kind of my ballywick. And there are plenty of people out there, and we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So anyway, that's it. You know, it's always good to have extra food for you and your pets, and extra medication for you and your pets. Communication devices, water. You know, like if you live in an area where it snows, if you go out for some groceries or something like that, make sure you got a bottle of a gallon jug of water in your car, in the cab of your car, and some blankets, maybe a 5-gallon bucket with some toilet paper in it, a bucket with a lid. You can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, right? Make sure you got a fire extinguisher in your car. A fire blanket's always good. I don't have one handy, but, you know, some snacks, especially if you're like diabetic, you know. You want to be able to signal people. A cop whistle, you know, like a whistle like Kate Winslet had in the Titanic. So you can signal people. Obviously, flashlights, good. Extra batteries, jackery, you know, to recharge your phone or whatever. Because, you know, there have been people over the past few years that in areas of the Northwest, what have you, that have been buried in their car for 2 weeks. Buried in their car for 2 weeks. You know, if you live in areas where you know, above the 30th parallel, it's a good idea to keep your snow shovel in the house, somewhere near where you can get to it in the house, because you might open your front door and see nothing but snow. This happened in Wales a couple of years ago. So there's that. I don't want to scare anybody. I mean, it's already scary. These fires are, you know, absurd. So that's that. I've got a bunch of links are in the descriptions to all of this stuff. The only thing with this video here, the climate toast, climate change, a meat grinder, is him saying that Jim White talking about sudden changes in the atmosphere must be caused by, or sudden changes in the climate must be caused by changes in the atmosphere. But there's a bunch of stuff that he says in there that's really, really interesting. It's not just that. And this is the actual documentary that has a bunch of stuff in it. The fascinating stuff about grinding up stone and putting it in growing vegetables. So I think that's about it. Trees and other plants produce hundreds of thousands of volatile organic compounds that are heat trapping, that are heavy and heat trapping. So I'm always looking for what's the trigger. Clouds revealing how trees' emissions shape the air around us. Volatile organic compounds cause smog. Yeah. Ozone, produce ozone, all that stuff. And UFOs, there's always interesting crap. So that's that. My name is R Crosby Lyles. This has been News from the Can. Respect. As a friend of mine used to say, respect is due a dog, Mr. Lyles. So, and as a great Navy SEAL said, I can't remember his name, and he did a video about it. Respect everyone, even if you disagree with them or you don't understand what they're doing. A little respect goes a long way. I think that's, you know, There are people that you think might not be willing, might be impenetrable, but they will listen if they're properly informed. If you talk to them like give them the proper respect when you're talking to them, they'll listen to you. You know what I mean? I gotta remember that I might not be able to see the big picture. So, love your neighbors. You know what I mean? Life's a bitch. Only a bitch if you are. I'm just saying. So, keep it real. You know what I mean? Keep some provisions. It's always good to protect your stuff. Have a Faraday box, cage, can to put your stuff in. Important communication equipment, stuff like that, what have you. Just in case the shit really, 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 really hits the fan. Which it's gonna, this is where we are. That shit's hitting the fan. So that's that for that. So I would just say, I'm trying to stay informational. I've done plenty of talking out the side of my ass, face, whatever. You know what I mean? Just as an experiment. But I think it's better to stick to what we know and be informational, because I don't really want to sway anybody. We don't know what's going to happen. It's always good to be prepared no matter what anyway, whatever happens. And that's all I got. I love you guys, keep it in the road. Don't take any wooden nickels. That's all I got. We'll be back. I took a break for a while, and but I'm gonna be trying to do regular stuff, and I'm gonna keep it as informational and as I possibly can, without diatribe. That's it. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. Take care. See you.